All right, radio listeners, today I have a special guest in Jane Ibbetson. Jane is the author of the book Smart Eating Made Simple. And Jane, we'd like to welcome you to the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Hi, Paul.
This is my aunt, if folks don't know it. And these folks lived for a long time in Colby, Kansas. Now they live in Phoenix, Arizona. We still get people that I talk to on the radio, people up here, Jane, that talk about your husband, Ron, and you guys. And so you made quite an impact while you lived here in Kansas, and a positive one. I'm probably the one making the negative impact, but folks, remember you and your family, and you still have family in Colby. And today we're here to talk about your new book. It's very, very interesting, entitled Smart Eating Made Simple. We're going to tell folks where they can check this book out and buy it if they so wish. But I wanted to ask you a few questions off the bat. What are healthy foods? Why do people eat them? And what motivated you to write this book in general?
Well, I had quite a story about myself. Actually, I started out telling about Clara, and that's my first name, which I don't go by, but I just had several bum years, I just didn't feel well at all, and I was always tired and dragging one leg, and I was trying to walk 3 miles a day just to be healthy, and I just started falling, and things just continued to go wrong, and I go to all these doctors, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And one doctor says, well, your thyroid is not that bad, but I'm going to send you to a neurologist. And so I think eventually the endocrinologist convinced the neurologist, let's give her radioactive iodine, and they said, is that my thyroid? And then my leg did get better. I wasn't dragging my leg, and I did feel somewhat better, but I was still tired. And then another doctor told me I had osteoarthritis and, infections and one thing after another. And I, after my knee replacement surgery, I thought I was hanging on to the wall. How can I continue to go to work like this? Because I felt badly. So I saw an article in the newspaper, I think it was, and I went to this seminar, and they told me about eating certain foods, and maybe I'd had, food sensitivities and maybe allergies. And so anyway, I followed their recommendations. I just had 80% improvement. I was convinced. And so I thought, from this point on, I'm not eating the standard American diet like I always ate. 'Cause I thought I ate healthy. I mean, I'm a nutritionist, so I thought I know what to eat. But I had to learn to change my diet, and I was convinced so much. I had 80% improvement, and I thought, I need to tell my family, especially, and other people about this. So I started writing this book, and that's what I did.
How long did it take you to write this book, Jane?
I started in about 2006. And it's probably about 7 years.
Well, there's a lot of information in this book, over 300 pages of information. It's very interesting. And when you're addressing, I think, regular Americans like me and most folks, we're not nutritionalists. We don't know what's good. Maybe we have misconceptions, or we've gotten some bad data, or we're just kind of going blindly. But maybe we could start with just saying, what are healthy foods, and why do people eat those?
Well, to me as a nutritionist, healthy foods are those that are nutrient-rich. This means that they contain a lot of vitamins and minerals, fiber, antioxidants, and many of these are found only in plants. Nutrients, they can reduce the inflammation in the body, and they can also, especially the antioxidants, can protect the body from free radical damage, which can cause disease. And I like to tell people, to think of vegetables, think fruit, think nuts, think beans, think whole grains, because these are the real foods. They're not processed with additional additives or chemicals or preservatives. And, people want to eat healthy foods for several reasons. And for one reason, you'll feel better, you might get cold less, your skin might look better, you breathe better, and the inside of your body, who knows what it looks like. I'm sure it would look better too.
Right.
And so people, they just want to eat healthy because they can envision real food, and some people feel that processed and manufactured foods are not really real food.
You start with those vegetables right as they're come out of the ground. I mean, before they're all stuff's put into them, you start with just the fresh vegetable itself.
Right, and that's better because it's like nature made it,
Right.
It's not processed.
Well, and a lot of times the different vegetables that you get out of the garden, the outside of the vegetables are good and things of that nature. People start processing them up. Now, if you're going to cook those, how do you manage to, or how do you go about trying to have the time to cook healthy?
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Well, how do you find the time? Well, it's so important to me that I just plan my work and work my plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I cook a lot on the weekends. Like I might make a pot of brown rice and a pot of beans, and then I freeze it in batches to use during the week. For example, the other day I made cooked a pot of garbanzo beans from which I made hummus to eat during the week. And, by the way, you'll love my recipe in Smart Eating Made Simple for hummus.
And that's a dish that we aren't introduced to very often, and I think there's a lot of dishes in this book, things that you might not think of eating all the time. Let's talk a little bit about meat, because I got to tell you, Jane, I'm a big meat eater. I mean, I could eat meat in my sleep, and to be honest, I probably have a few times. What are your thoughts on meat? You need to get away from meat? You need to change your thinking about meat? Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
If you're sincerely objective and honest and seeking to understand what diet is best for you, then it's probably important to trust your body to guide you. It's important to listen to your body as you experiment with different food ratios, and this includes or excludes animal foods. Some people can get by on less meat, whereas others, they feel like they want it,
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly believe Americans eat way too much protein in the form of meat, which pushes the amount of vegetables to a bare minimum. Vegetables are the healing foods. Therefore, it only stands to reason that our plate should mainly consist of vegetables with a little bit of meat. And if you want to eat meat in a truly healthful way, and yes, meat can be and is healthy, then we need to eat organic and the grass-fed beef.
When we go and we hear about healthy living, we hear about the omegas, and I've heard this omega-6 fatty acids. I've heard this omega-3 fatty acids and different things. I know nothing about that. Could you tell folks a little bit of the differences between those?
Yeah, they're both essential for the body, which means that we need to get them in our food. Omega-6 fatty acids are found in processed foods, especially those contained in vegetable oils like corn, soybeans, safflower, canola oil, and it's also found in meat and chicken. The omega-3 fatty acids are found like in flaxseed, leafy greens, and fatty fish such as salmon, sardines, tuna, and that type of fish. One good way to remember it is that omega-6 fatty acids come from the grains or the seeds,
okay,
and the omega-3 fatty acids come from the green leafy leaves of vegetables.
Well, that's interesting.
So if you have a fish, then what you think about, what does a fish eat? Well, a fish eats the algae in the sea, right? So that's why they're so high in omega-3 fatty acids. In the same way with our beef. If you get beef from the feedlot, then they're higher in omega-6 as compared to beef that is out grazing
right.
the field, getting the green leaves.
Yeah, the one's good. Yeah.
And that's why I say eat organic and grass-fed beef. But the whole key with this omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids is that we need to have a good balance of those. And over the past years, it's been like 20 to 1 omega-6 as compared to omega-3. So we need to get it down into the proportion of like 2 to 1. That's why we hear so much about it today.
Well, let me ask you, you were telling your story in Clara about how your health was diminishing, you were feeling bad, and all the doctors were kind of treating you from the outside in, and you decided at this point to eat good food, put good food into your system. Talk a little bit more about how healthy eating can help to heal disease.
Well, back in the days before food chemists entered the picture, people had a close relationship with the food that eventually wound up on their plates and in their stomach. plants served as food and medicine at the same time. Let's think about like the tiny caraway seed, for instance. It greatly improves the flavor of a cabbage dish, and at the same time it mellows the discomforting effect of the sauerkraut on the bowel system. Plants can fuel the body with the right quality and quantity of potent nutrition and promote well-being and healing. And so the search for an answer to abnormalities associated with various diseases, going as far back as the early 1900s, led a lot of people, or the investigators, researchers, into the gastrointestinal tract, like specialists, allergists, and psychiatrists. They believe certain types of foods, environmental factors, and faulty absorption of nutrients affect the functioning of the body, and this includes the brain and the nervous system. And so this deterioration of the intestinal tract leads to bacterial contamination, and it will produce toxins, which in turn attributes to a person's inability to absorb essential nutrients due to the injuries in the small intestine accompanying the disease. An example of this would be like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, and that they have a lot of problems with healthy bacteria in their intestine. I'd like to mention, too, in regards to this, is there's a German scientist and author that spent practically half of her life explaining how unsaturated essential fatty acids, like those found in flax oil, when combined with a high-quality protein, which makes the essential fatty acid easily soluble, will counteract these toxic and poisonous accumulations in all the tissues. So flooding the cells with electron-rich fat gives oxygen to the cells, and it provides opposite electrical charges. And so how fat and protein associate within the cell reveals the living or the dying state. And the metabolism of fat affects every organ of the body, including life itself.
Wow, it's fascinating stuff. And radio listeners, we're speaking to Jane Ibbetson, nutritionalist and author of the book Smart Eating Made Simple. You can find this book at Amazon.com, Barnes & Nobles, and all of your major book outlets. We have it linked for our listeners' convenience at IbbetsonUSA.com, our master website of superior conservative values. Fascinating stuff, Jane. Fascinating book. Interesting reading, and I think beneficial reading. Do you have any parting thoughts today before we sign off? And just thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, I want to say thanks for having me. And yes, I have a blog that people can go on online and read my blog. And also I'll be on Facebook and Twitter. Okay.
Do you know your URL for your blog?
Well, it's janeibbetson.authors.express, and that's with an express.com.
Sounds good. We'll go ahead and throw that up on our master website here for folks so they can check out your blog and see what's happening as well. Jane Ibbetson, my aunt, but also author and nutritionalist. It's very fun. We talk to a lot of authors, Jane, on a lot of books, and they're seldom related to me. And so it's a nice mix here and a very interesting book. And no surprise, your farming history and all this beautiful Kansas farming history might have led to the culmination in a wonderful educational book entitled Smart Eating Made Simple. Jane Ibbetson, we just want to thank you so much for coming on the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Well, thank you.